The sun might not be shining, but it doesn't get much more picture postcard than that, does it, folks? This is the cottage I'm going to show you today, with about 1.4 acres of land. What a beautiful place. Hello everyone and welcome back to Mossy Bottom. This is the second episode in my Dream Cottages for Sale series here in Ireland, where I've lived on my own 1 acre small holding here in County Sligo for the last 5 years. If you missed that first episode, then in these videos I visit properties for sale right now at the time of filming, which I think have the potential to become small holdings just like mine, with an emphasis on self-sufficiency, growing your own vegetables, keeping livestock, chickens, ducks, pigs, sourcing your own water and energy, providing yourself with fuel to heat your home, and perhaps even generating a small income to pay for the things which you can't provide yourself. And if you did miss that first episode, then go back and take a look, because in many ways it could not be more different to the cottage and land that I'm about to show you. And I think that makes for a really interesting comparison in terms of what you get for your money. I'm going to give you a tour, inside and out, talk you through exactly what you do get, the land, the outbuildings, the potential uses, the location, the facilities on site and those lacking, and of course, the price. This cottage with over 1 acre of land is for sale right now, but if after watching this video you are interested, then you'll need to move quickly because it's going to auction at the end of this month, October. Okay, let's jump right in. First of all, the location. So we are once again in County Leitrim, but this time in the far north of the county, just 5 minutes from the border with Cavan. And this part of Leitrim is very mountainous and very forested, more so than the south of the county. In fact, the cottage has mountains on one side to the east and Loch Allen, a huge lake, on the other to the west. The current owner of this property is from Wales, and she told me that the area very much reminded her of her home. And having hiked up Snowdon a few times myself, I can see why. It really is a beautiful area. The Corrie Strand, a famous lakeside beach, is about a 10-minute drive away, and there are hikes up the mountains to the east with spectacular views. But the flip side of that is that this property is quite remote. There are no large towns in the immediate vicinity, Carrick-on-Shannon being a good 30-minute drive by car, and Sligo to the west is about an hour. Though admittedly, those routes, and I've driven them a few times, are some of the most spectacular in this part of Ireland. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of the cottage when we go inside, but first of all, what exactly do you get and how much is it? Well, you get a stone cottage, which in its original form we think is around 250 years old, so much older than mine. The cottage was fully restored 20 years ago, having fallen into ruin prior to that. In its current condition, it is a livable home with 3 bedrooms, though one admittedly is on the small side. So let's say 2 and a box room. You also get a separate stone workshop, which is currently being used for animal housing and storage, but was restored at the same time as the cottage 20 years ago, and structurally is in perfect condition. There's a further small stone outbuilding to the rear of the cottage, which again has been restored and is used for housing a pair of extremely large pigs, which I shall introduce you to in due course. There are a few other interesting structures which we'll get to, and it's worth noting that this property has mains electricity in the cottage and both the outbuildings. It has a septic tank. It has a rainwater collection system with a large storage tank, though that does need maintenance and modernisation. And it has over 1 acre of usable land. I'm going to explore that, talk about the soil type, its condition, how it's been used, and what I think it would be suitable for later in this video. First though, the price. This property is currently for sale for €85,000. And just like the last property, there are compromises, not least the remote location. But for the right person or family who's comfortable living remotely, you're getting one heck of a lot for your money. And it's beautiful, especially when you consider this viewing was in mid-October on an overcast afternoon. I wish the sun had been shining like it is today. Just imagine it in June when the flowers are out and the birds are singing. Oh, and yes, if you're wondering, it is south-facing, like almost all cottages here in Ireland. The windows might not be very big, but they knew which direction to point them in. Before we take a tour of the cottage, this video is sponsored by the lovely team at Skillshare, which, for anyone who still doesn't know, is an online community for learning through educational video courses. And they cover just about every subject under the sun. I've mentioned in previous videos courses on gardening, woodworking, canning, art, nature, making life changes. And in this video, I want to talk briefly about this course. Sustainable Living Basics, Simple Steps to Make an Impact by Catherine Kellogg. Sustainability goes hand in hand with the lifestyle that I lead and the philosophy that I have. And if you are inspired by or interested in moving to a cottage like this yourself, then the chances are it's an important thing to you too. But you don't have to live on a small holding to care about the environment. This fantastic course gives practical steps on shopping habits, reducing waste, and other aspects of a sustainable life which anyone can implement, no matter their situation. Skillshare has thousands of courses and over 8 million members. If you want to learn online with content created by experts working in their industry, then it's definitely the place to go. Finally, the first 1,000 of my subscribers to click the link down in the description will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare so you can start exploring your creativity today. Okay, let's go. The first thing to note is the exceptional stonework. These walls are as straight as the day they were made, and that's because the stone has been shaped and laid to such a high standard. If I compare this to my own cottage, the difference is like night and day. There is no question that this building has been made by professional masons, not have-a-go farmers. Not that I have anything against have-a-go farmers, I kind of feel like one myself, to be honest. And in terms of its history, local knowledge suggests that this building was once, in the 1800s, a school. There would of course have been many small schoolhouses just like this in rural areas. The windows are double glazed, now 20 years old, and although they're PVC, they do fit the original aperture proportions. There is nothing I think quite as soul-destroying as discovering a beautiful old stone cottage with huge modern windows that look totally out of proportion to that building. In one fell swoop, all the external character is lost, but not so in this cottage. It definitely looks authentic because it is. Personally, I would replace the windows like for like with wooden ones. The roof was reslated when the cottage was restored and is in excellent condition. The only thing that may need replacing is the fascia boards that support the guttering, which are looking a bit tired and may be beginning to rot in places. Moving inside, you can immediately see the charm of this little house. The ceilings are low, but not too low, unless you're 7 foot tall. There are original features and exposed stonework everywhere you look. But don't get too attached to the furniture or decoration because that will be going with the owner. There's a wood-burning stove in the living area, though it's a tad on the small side, I think, for the space. I'd be tempted to install a bigger one with a back boiler and fit a central heating system, at least downstairs. Because apart from 2 wood-burning stoves on the ground floor, the only other heat source is electric box heaters, which are very expensive to run. One of 2 main reasons I think that the current owner is leaving. We'll get to the other later. These old cottages definitely suffer from damp. The foundations and cavity walls of a modern house just aren't there to keep the moisture out. So a constant and reliable heat source, especially through the colder, wetter months, is essential. But there are solutions, you just need to factor that into your budget. There's a galley kitchen, which is basic but adequate, and behind that, to the rear of the house, is a small extension with a utility area, bathroom, and separate toilet. All, I'm told, in working order, though I didn't get round to trying them out, I have to admit. Going upstairs, the first thing you might notice is that it feels quite dark. Well, it was an overcast day and quite a few of the bulbs needed replacing, including in this room. So that is somewhat misleading. Although it is definitely true to say that this cottage, like most here in Ireland, is probably best suited to people who like cosy, softly lit spaces. The type of person like me who upon entering a pub always seeks out the darkest, cosiest looking alcove to hide away in. That, in my opinion, is the atmosphere you want when buying a 250-year-old stone cottage in rural Ireland. But admittedly, it's definitely not for everyone. There are exposed beams and original features throughout, as well as hardwood floors, though they definitely need re-waxing. And to be honest, the walls need repainting too. The owner has cats and dogs, and the decor is looking tired. But most of that work is superficial and can easily be done by unskilled hands. It's also not something you'd need to do prior to moving in, because there's plenty of space here and you can work on one room at a time. So that's the cottage. What about the outbuildings? Well, the main outbuilding is this workshop. And the chap who restored this property 20 years ago, not the current owner I should say, was a skilled joiner who used this space, I would imagine, to make everything for the restoration. It doesn't look very nice right now, but clean away those cobwebs, fit new lights, repaint the walls, maybe change the external doors, and you've got a usable workshop or storage space with sound windows and a sound roof that doesn't leak. However, the guttering does need a bit of attention, as does the rainwater collection system, which you can see here is connected only to the workshop. Thankfully it rains a lot in Ireland. I never thought I'd be thankful of that. And the rainwater tank is huge, but personally I would connect the house to that tank too to make sure the water never ran out, especially if there's more than one person going to be living here. So, while it's great to have your own water source, and I should say there is no mains water connection here, this rainwater collection system is going to require some maintenance, so factor that into your budget too. The other outbuilding is much smaller, but restored at the same time with the same galvanised roofing, windows and concrete base. And these are the two lucky fellas who live in there right now. I bet my two cooney pigs wish they had a stone building to live in. What luxury. And the great thing about stone structures, of course, is they store and release heat. So it'll never drop below freezing in here, unlike it does in my caravan sometimes. And in the summer, they have the opposite effect, keeping the space cool during those constant Irish heat waves. So what about the other structures which I mentioned earlier? Well, opposite the second stone outbuilding, there is a shed and covered space. It's admittedly looking very tired at this point, but most of that timber is sound, so restored and repainted, it could make excellent animal housing, perhaps for rabbits, chickens or ducks. And then there's a wood store, which at the moment has become a lean-to for this pink wheelbarrow and a home for 2 rabbits. But if I bought this property, I would most certainly return this structure to its original intended use, because there is plenty of wood on site to harvest and process. And what people often forget is that timber takes 2 years of drying to season before it can be burnt for heat. Otherwise, it's going to release too much smoke and steam. I have a huge wood store at my property, which was formerly used to store peat and is absolutely essential if you want to produce your own fuel. Finally, in terms of structures, there is this rather small greenhouse, which, like much of this space, has been well and truly loved by those porkers. I'm told the pigs managed to destroy it by using it as a scratching post. Pigs will definitely do that. It could potentially be restored, but personally, thinking about it, I'd probably replace it with a large polytunnel on the acre of land. Speaking of which, let's talk about just that. So first, the elephant in the room, that mud, which I'm sure you've all noticed. It surrounds the cottage and the outbuildings, and it's the second main reason I think that the current owner wants to move. But as someone who also lives in the northwest of Ireland, I know from my own small holding here that this is just what happens when you combine a clay-rich soil like we have with rain and heavy footfall. The owner allows her pigs to wander around these buildings. I should have said the pigs in the room, shouldn't I? Or the pigs in the yard. But that is why this has happened. The solution, just like with my own paths at Mossy Bottom, is to let it fully dry or scrape it off, put membrane down and then gravel the entire area around those buildings. You could also pour a concrete slab, though I don't think it would be as in keeping with the age and authenticity of the stone buildings. You might at the same time want to add a drainage channel running from the wettest areas around the cottage down into the ditch along the road. In my first year at Mossy Bottom, the driveway in and out was pure mud. My car even got stuck there in the winter. So I scraped it off, laid membrane, dug a drainage ditch by hand, and then covered with gravel. And in spite of some very wet winters, it has never flooded since or indeed been boggy. And I did that entire thing with a wheelbarrow and shovel, shifting about 4 or 5 tons of gravel myself. If I was to do it again, I'd definitely hire a mini digger for a couple of days. But this problem can absolutely be solved, and in order to enjoy living here, especially during the wetter months, I think it's a necessity for any new owner. In terms of cost, with a mini digger, doing the labour yourself, maybe €1,000 to €1,500. The rest of the land is surrounded by mature trees. It's very sheltered, which is perfect for growing food. We're also at 80 metres above sea level here, and because the land is on a slope, it doesn't flood. You can see the odd rush growing, but that's likely because of compaction from pig trails. And when you see the size of these chaps, you'll realise why. They're saddleback pigs, which is a huge breed. The owner tells me that their mother was a whopping 30 stone in weight. That's almost 200 kilograms or 420 pounds. And I'm told they get even bigger than that too. You can see there are semi-mature apple trees growing here, which do yield a small harvest every year, and an awful lot of trees around the perimeter and on the land itself, which could be thinned or coppiced for firewood. I am comfortably able to produce enough firewood from my own acre of land to keep my stove burning through the winter every year. So with a small chainsaw and splitting axe, and of course the fuel store to season it in, you can absolutely produce your own heat from this land. Right now, the land is quite treacherous to walk on and chaotic. It does need tidying up, fencing off from the buildings, and frankly, not having 2 colossal pigs turning it into a mosh pit every winter. But it would be perfect for chickens, ducks, even goats, maybe even a small pony too. But it is just over 1 acre, and compared to the 31 acres at the previous cottage in this series, that's a lot less. You're certainly not going to be able to keep cows or large horses here without that land being completely destroyed. If you want to do what I do though, here at Mossy Bottom, you really couldn't ask for more. And did I mention the aspect, the slope that is, because it's south facing. Perfect. Okay, it's time to give this cottage and land a self-sufficiency score, just like the last one, focusing on food, water, warmth, shelter, access, and income. First of all, food. So you've got an acre of usable land which has a south-facing aspect and doesn't flood. I produce about 60% of the food I eat here at Mossy Bottom. Potatoes, root vegetables, brassicas, beetroot, spinach, peas, beans, corn, lots of different things. And all of them grow outside. Add a polytunnel and you can grow even more. With small livestock like chickens, ducks, maybe even a couple of goats for dairy, you might even push that number up higher. I'm going to give it 4 out of 5 for food. The potential is huge, and the simple truth is, unless you're keeping large, heavy animals like horses, you really don't need that much land on a small holding. Next, water. Well, it doesn't have mains water, but it does have a pretty robust rainwater collection system that's 20 years old, but that will need some initial investment and then regular maintenance. 4 out of 5 for water. Next, warmth. Honestly, with this many trees around the perimeter, a ready-made wood store and 2 wood-burning stoves in the cottage, which are in active use, I'm going to have to give it a 5 for warmth. Next, shelter. This is where things are very different to the last cottage that I featured in the first episode. There was no ready-made home. It required work and planning permission before you could move in. Here, you can move straight in, and you've got a workshop as well that's watertight and has electricity, as well as a few other outbuildings. Certainly the cottage needs a refresh and perhaps modernising a little. You might want to fit a shower in that bathroom, I know I would. But it doesn't need any structural work, and it is ready to move in. So overall, I'm going to have to give it a 5 out of 5 for shelter. Next, access. Well, the road connects directly to the cottage. Although it's steep, if my Nissan Micra can make it up there, and it did, then trust me, any car can. So you're never going to have access issues to the cottage itself, and that road doesn't flood. The land, however, is on a slope and needs paths installing, as well as areas gravelling, like around the outbuildings. For that reason, I'm going to give it 4 out of 5 for access. I should add as well, there's only one other house further along that road. It's not a through road, it's a dead end. And in the 3 hours or so that I was there, not a single car passed by. It is extremely quiet, though I have to admit, it doesn't have that lovely sense of isolation being at the very end of a lane, which Mossy Bottom has, and which I fell in love with here. Finally, income. And this is where the property does fall short. It would make a great holiday home, or a rental cottage, but if your intention is to live in it, which I think it deserves, then you're quite limited with ways to make money. You could certainly sell produce that you grow, but there's no busy road to put a stall on, so you'd have to drive into town or sell at farmers markets or in shops. There also isn't really enough space for guest accommodation, nor is there enough land to grow things on a more commercial scale like you maybe could have at the last property. But there is 4G internet access, I checked, so if you are able to work from home remotely, the connection is there. I'm going to give it a 2, maybe a 3 out of 5 for income. So who would this cottage and land suit? Well, I think it would suit someone who wants a ready-made picture postcard home, without having to do building work, with enough land to grow food and keep some small animals, without starting a business. There is work to do here, cleaning, painting, gravelling, repairing, tidying, but most of that work is definitely within the scope of someone who's just handy, or willing to budget some extra funds to pay for labour. If you do happen to be a plumber and know how to install a central heating system, a shower, and maybe to maintain a rainwater collection system, then all the better, because that's the main skill that you would need as a tradesperson. But I think this place would best suit a small family, a couple, or even an individual who are comfortable living remotely, perhaps can work through the internet, and don't need to be too near a town. And now the part that I love. If I bought this cottage and land, what would I personally do with it? Well, I said in the last Dream Cottage video that if I bought it, you'd probably never hear from me again because there was so much to do there. But I think in this one, you probably would, because it really would lend itself to everything that I'm doing here at Mossy Bottom, with the added advantage of having a finished home to live in. I'd definitely gravel around the buildings pretty quickly because that would bother me. I'd probably introduce some goats and perhaps turn the smaller stone outbuilding into a dairy. I'd coppice and trim a lot of those trees for firewood without compromising the shelter that they offer to a vegetable garden. And I'd probably utilise that south-facing cottage roof to install solar panels as an energy source. The biggest difference, I think, is that I'd film a lot more videos inside, sat in front of that cosy wood-burning stove. And I might even let Moss in too. Of course I would. Okay folks, so endeth our tour of Dream Cottage number 2. If you are genuinely interested in viewing this property, then you can send a mail to the email address listed down in the description and I will forward it on to the owner. I make no commission for a sale, so this has been my genuine, unbiased view, as always in these videos. Remember, if you have a dream cottage for sale here in Ireland, anywhere in the country, or perhaps somewhere you're contemplating putting on the market, and you think it could feature in this series that I make, then get in touch because I'd love to hear from you. Thank you as always for watching, subscribing and supporting the channel. From me, from Moss, and from the many pigs and cats and other animals that featured in this video, take care and bye for now.
Born in a Quaker town where folks worked good and hard for the ones they loved and got above. Each day they punched their card, and when evening came back home again, they'd rest a while and say, "'Tis a hard old life, but for kids and wife we'll work as another day." When the sun rose low, back to work they'd go, singing on their way. For job and home to call our own, we'll work as another day. Oh,
Hello everyone and... Oh God, don't start that. There's no need for it. Hello everyone and welcome back to Mossy Bottom. This is the... Shut up, please. But you don't have to live on a small holding to care about the environment. This fantastic course gives practical steps on shopping habits, reducing waste and other aspects of a sustainable life. Which anyone... That was a bit too much, fellas.